What does getting over the hill for the Houston Texans offense actually look like that can result in success? Plus, an early look at the Tennessee Titans game this Sunday.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, from H-Town to your town. Today's episode and every episode of the Locked On Texan podcast is for Texan fans all around. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for being a part of the everyday family that you guys are out there. Shout out to my everydayers from the Himalayas. I'm your Texans football analyst and credential media member, John Hickman. The last 24 to 48 hours for the Houston Texans have been extremely sour. So this podcast will be looking at how can they get over the hill against the Tennessee Titans offensively. An early look at this Titans team, a team that I am not confident really picking Houston to beat. But if I put everything out on the table, I think that they will. By no means do I think we're going to see an offensive explosion. Hopefully we will, but I don't think that we will. And also, I'm going to end off today's episode just looking at moving off assets for the future if this thing, which I already consider disastrous, really continues to show that it's going to be one of the worst seasons we've seen in Texans history. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I know some of y'all probably thinking to yourself, man, this team won 2 games before. And I understand that in terms of the worst season ever tag that I just put on this season. But considering the expectations for this season, considering how nobody picked any other team but Houston to win this division, considering how all things are just kind of failing itself right now for the Houston Texans, I would say that this could possibly be one of the worst seasons in franchise history. But it's important for us to talk about just this offense getting over the hill. I'm going to say this, and let me make myself clear. The Texans would look like fools if they fire Nick Caley right now. Right now does not mean not at the end of the season. Right now, going into week 4, they look like fools firing him now than what they did hiring him in the first place. All right. And I think that he would benefit heavily from going to the booth and really game planning around the strengths of the players. So that's where I want to start off today's conversation. Listen, Nick Caley needs to find a way to involve the receivers in the offensive strategy. It's to a point where I wonder what were the conversations during the draft process. Nick Caley was already in the building. So what were those conversations like? Through 3 weeks, it feels like it's been a waste of talent for Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Noel has 2 catches for 11 yards. The only sign of life we've seen from that young man has been his punt return ability. And Higgins can't get targets consistently either to show his worth. I mean, he's averaging 20 yards per catch at the very least. You'd think the Houston Texans and Nick Caley would try to find a way to get the ball in that young man's hands. It's just been an overall mess. So I do wonder what the conversations were, because it feels like maybe Houston should have went after a guard and tackle instead of wide receiver, tackle, wide receiver. Right? And then also looking at the other top 100 pick, Jalen Smith. He hasn't been active, though we know he started off the year playing for Houston. He's now on IR. Currently, Houston has about a 5 wide receiver group in the NFL, aside from 2 or 3 drives this season. Nico Collins, where Nico Collins has scored, there hasn't been real production, nothing big for Houston, nothing sustainable for Houston from the wide receiver group. The rookies have not received, real targets. And what's more frustrating is the guys that's been out there on the field when they're getting those targets, if they get an opportunity to get the targets in the first place, they haven't had an opportunity to make the most of their situation. So for Nick Caley, they have to, and I mean have to, find a way to get these wide receivers involved. Per True Media, against the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Texans ran a lot of out routes in hitches, especially on first and second down. Where the offense is really lacking right now is Tank Dell not being out there on the field and his ability to absolutely kill defenses on those corner routes, on those out routes, where he creates separation so fast and make a play to get upfield. When people say CJ Stroud is missing his best friend, quote unquote best friend, Tank Dell, it isn't just a buddy thing. It's a on the field. There is a night and day difference when CJ has Tank Dell compared to when he doesn't have Tank Dell. And immediately I go to the corner routes, right? I go directly to that when I look at where Houston is lacking right now. On the 84 pass attempts for Houston, 4 have been corner routes this season with a completion percentage of 25%. In 2024, you look at Tank Dell even having a higher yards before catch rate than Nico Collins. And I know I'm revisiting the past a little bit, but a lot of people want Jalen Noel to fill that void for Tank Dell. The reality is Noel is a straight line wide receiver with amazing speed, 4.3 speed, but more so in the open field and not in between the numbers, at least not yet. In between the numbers, that's where you will see Tank Dell get really busy. So far, Caley, the question should be, what are you doing in conjunction with CJ Stroud to figure out what you can do to get the wide receivers more involved in the week-to-week game plan? And this is why I'm looking at moving to the booth where you can delegate. Like when people talk about the advantages of coaching from the booth, especially early on in a career, Kyle Shanahan once said, often when you go to the booth, you can see coverages and rotations so much better up there. So that's one advantage. But also, I think for Nick Caley, who is experiencing a lot, and I'm going to be fair to him by acknowledging, was he set up the best? Probably not. He probably shouldn't be here in the first place. But he needs to be able to communicate with the offensive staff quicker and delegate with those guys throughout the game, making it more of a collective coaching experience. Bill Lazor's on his coaching staff. Jerry Slapinski's on his coaching staff, right? So those guys, I think, need to be able to be around him a lot more. I think Nick Caley needs a partner in his ear right now. I really do. And so, again, just highlighting where Houston, needs to be to get over the hill before I look at it and early look at what they need to do against the Tennessee Titans. It's getting to a place where they're not doing the bad things at a higher rate in crucial downs and doing the good things at a higher rate consistently throughout the game. D'Amico Ryans even just mentioned how different CJ Stroud looks when they're operating in a quote-unquote too-many type of style of offense. When they're moving with an up-tempo, moving quickly, and you have a quarterback out there that's not necessarily thinking too much as opposed to he's out there just wheeling and dealing, playing point guard a little bit. I think that's what the Houston Texans offense needs to do. And also, don't be so quick to run away from running the ball. No pun intended. They got to be able to stick with that a little bit more. Each of the last 3 games, the 3 games this year, the second half rushing attempts have gone down in each game. And then you look at each game and you think to yourself, well, they're still in the game throughout both games. So they have to be able to lean on it a lot more, especially when they want to try some of these play action attempts downfield where it feels like nobody's buying that. Really quick before I move on, I do want to pull out some of the good things that happened in the game against, the Jacksonville Jaguars. When CJ Stroud was kept clean, 20 of 28, 178 yards, a 70% completion percentage, 1 TD, 1 interception, 0 sacks, of course, kept clean. Also, check this out. Just a little bit over, a fraction over 2 seconds to throw the ball. What does that indicate? That indicates CJ Stroud was just dinking and dunking, finding the ball, getting the ball over to open guys underneath, which is where he's been the most successful through 3 games. I know he wants that deep shot down the field. He has to take a step back and say it's not there as of right now. When I come back on the opposite side, I'll look at some of the other positives from Sunday's matchup, how they can take that into Tennessee, where they desperately need a win this Sunday. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, more IIHS top safety picks awards than anyone else. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, right? Somewhat of a luxury vacation on the road, from smooth handling to intuitive control. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every moment count, you make every move count, impossible feels irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Looking at, some of the good things that the Houston Texans have been able to do through 3 games and back to the Sunday matchup. Again, 117 yards on throws from 0 to 9 yards from the line of scrimmage. The recipe for success for this team is absolutely take what you can underneath. And I do want to add, though the down the field pass, which probably would have set Houston up to win that game, to Christian Kirk, where you may want to see him drift out more away from the safety than drift into the safety, probably would have caught that and could have scored, or at least got down to the 3 to 4 yard line. I'm noticing that his addition should be able to help with some of the underneath success that the Houston Texans is looking for right now. So I'm curious to see how his progression will continue to play out if he's going to be on this roster towards the end of the year. Also, CJ in the passing offense has looked the best and most efficient. Again, when getting the ball out quickly, the slant route has been Houston's most efficient route through 3 games. Also, taking a look at this year's struggle, protecting CJ Stroud. The O-line, I think they've gotten better. It hasn't been a major leap, but it's been minor. We got to give it credit where credit is due. Through 3 games, only 3 sacks when CJ Stroud is not blitzed, compared to 5 when he is blitzed. So teams are figuring out, hey, man, right now, it may not just necessarily be the offensive line. It could be the running back assignments. It could be the tight end assignments and a couple of sacks. It could be we just got to him and CJ broke out of the pocket and didn't step up in the pocket. But they're figuring out, you send 5, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to get home after CJ Stroud and get a sack. Now, the Titans have a few things going on. Brian Callahan gave over play calling duties to quarterbacks coach Bo Hardegree. A lot of growing concerns with Callahan's job security right now. Sweat is on IR. J.C. Latham is out right now. Teams have rushed for 437 yards in 3 games, averaging 146 yards per game and 6 touchdowns on the ground. Plus, on the flip side, the Titans have not been able to run the ball. 3.8 yards per carry, under 90 yards per game. Cam Ward has also been sacked 15 times. And on the flip side, the Tennessee Titans have not been able to get after quarterbacks. They only had 2 sacks on the year. So you look at a lot of things that the Houston Texans do well and the things that they do very bad. You look at how that can play a major role into why Houston could lose this game. They can get after the quarterback, but they've shown that you can get after our quarterback as well. Now, what I think plays into Houston's favor right now, because the Texans may not want to hear this. Texan fans may not want to hear this, but the Adams, like the Tennessee Titans, are your cousins from the Adams side of the family. Both dysfunctional organizations right now, internally and the spilling over externally with how the product on the field has been playing out, right? So what can the Houston Texans do to win this game? Just an early look conversation against the Tennessee Titans. I think they got to run that ball, man. They have to run the ball. Like I gave you guys the numbers, just looking at how Tennessee has averaged allow for teams to run for 146 on the ground per game through 3 games. That's number one. Also, you look at some of the rushing success that the Houston Texans have had so far. 2 of the 3 games, you see both of your running backs having an average of 4.2 or more yards per pop. But in the second half, in these halves that you're still in the game, you see Houston drifting away from that. Or you also see the Houston Texans just not having the opportunity to be out on the field with their players, on the offensive side of the ball because too many 3-and-out. So they got to lean more into just being able to kind of run down a weak run defense of team with no sweat. Simmons will be there. Simmons will cause a lot of hell. And they got to understand that it's very important to game plan for him. But there's not another player on this defensive line for the Tennessee Titans that scares me. There's not a player in their tight end, not tight end room, but linebacker room that scares me. But overall, looking at how other teams have been able to establish their offense, it's been by being able to run the ball. And here's the thing, Texan fans out there, the Texans should not be scared to say, hey, you know what? We're going to give opposing defenses a mix of both Nick Chubb and Woody Marks. Woody Marks does not have to just be regulated to being out there for passing down situations. The young man can run the ball. Is he a special runner? I am not saying that. However, what I do think Woody Marks is an efficient runner right now. Outside of his first game where I think he only got either one carry or he didn't get a lot of carries. And if we're looking at, the correlation of what the numbers are saying, he's getting more touches as the games progress. Whether it's in the backfield, whether it's or out of the backfield. He's getting more touches. But the Houston Texans should not be scared to run that ball against the Tennessee Titans. And I'm going to say this. If you run the ball well, if Houston can run the ball well at a rate that the volume matches the production, then that should force a team that just traded off a cornerback, a starting cornerback, that doesn't have the best secondary, that should force them to come down a little bit, just enough to where you can create leverage on some of these play action deep passes down the field that your quarterback wants so very badly. That should be where the Houston Texans should set themselves up for success. Running the ball against a poor run defense and forcing them to believe that they're going to do it again. And when it's not done, you got to have more than a 2-man play action route. So, again, my confidence level in Houston right now is low because of what they've shown themselves to not be able to do consistently, right? And I'm also point this out. Hey, Houston, find a way to get Jaden Higgins lined up in the slot. I'm looking at some of the numbers per PFF for Roger McQuarrie. Out of the 14 targets, 11 catches allowed, nearly an 80% completion percentage, 80 yak yards. Try to get some of these guys matched up on players that may have a weakness in their game, right? Amani Hooker has allowed 13 yards per catch. Of the 12 targets, he's allowed 8, 40 yak yards on the year. For the Houston Texans wide receivers to get into the game plan, it's all about making things easier for them and not forcing them into a box of expectation. If that's the case, then Houston completely squandered away their draft. Now, here's a real conversation to be had. If Houston loses Sunday, or if this thing gets to a point where the Houston Texans season is not salvageable, and it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere, and the bye week approaches Houston, right? Should the Houston Texans consider moving off assets right now for the future general manager who will not be Nick Caserio? Let's talk about that to close out today's show. Before diving into that conversation, you know what's important? Still having some energy and still having some fun for yourself. And I know Texas fans, it ain't been all, sunshine and sun rays. It's been a little doom and gloom going around. That's what happens when you start 0-4. But FanDuel's hooking y'all up, man, especially new customers. If you bet $5 for your first time, if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. And for Texan fans right now, it may just be keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, but that shouldn't stop you. That shouldn't stop you from adding more energy and excitement to your Sundays. And FanDuel lets you bet however you like. Player props, same game parlays, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Texas fans, we are in a state of disbelief, many of us now. Starting the year off, I thought Houston would be 2-1 at this point. I picked them to lose against the Rams. I thought that they'd get over the hump against Baker Mayfield. I thought that they were going to clear the Jacksonville Jaguars. Clearly, none of that has happened. All week is going to be a therapy session for every episode. You can consider your therapy. None of these things that I presume would have happened has happened. And so, for the Houston Texans, who has a big 2026 ahead of them. I mean, 2025 was important too. They got a big 2026 ahead of them. You got Joe Mixon contract that runs through 2026. Remember, Houston traded a 7th-round pick for him. And then after that, gave him a 3-year extension. This is year 2 of that. So he's still signed through 2026. Azeez Al-Shaair, same situation. He was extended into 2026. You have Danielle Hunter extended through 2026 as well. The question is, at what point do we look at Houston moving off of assets to give their next general manager more wiggle room to operate and do the things that he wants to do and not have to deal with the things that the previous, which is Nick Caserio, has done with this roster? Danielle Hunter, Christian Kirk, Damian Pierce, Davis Mills, Sheldon Rankins, Jimmy Ward. At what point during the season, if they do it all. Now, granted, I'm going to say this. I think any general manager would love to have Danielle Hunter on his roster, especially considering that you just have him for 1 year. After that, you have to start to, look at working on Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. But I'm not going to necessarily put Danielle Hunter in that mix unless the calls Houston is getting right now for him is something that makes sense for the future. And then who's going to make that decision, right? It always feels like D'Amico Ryans is going to be here no matter what. It always feels like Nick Caserio will be the first guy out the door. That was the case a couple of seasons ago when Nick Caserio came on and said at the post-game press conference, if I'm here, I'm here. If I'm not, then I do what I can. This was before D'Amico Ryans got hired, right? Then they had 2 years of a great honeymoon. But now that honeymoon is over. So does Houston look at moving on from players like a Christian Kirk during the year if this thing isn't just working out? And if so, what does the return look like? Well, a player like Christian Kirk, you're not going to get a high return. A player like Jimmy Ward, who I think should not be on the roster or even considered to be here in the first place, and this has nothing to do with his legal issues. This is all just his play on the field. I think Thomas passed him a little bit. But obviously there's a great relationship here in Houston. Do you look at a player like, can you find a trade partner for Damian Pierce? Is there a trade partner out there for Tim Settle, who I like for Houston to keep? But a lot of these pieces that Houston brought in were some complementary pieces to the big guys. The big guys can stay, but if you can move off of a complementary piece to maybe boost what your future looks like, then I think that's a smart move. And I wouldn't be opposed, honestly, if Houston got a call that said, hey, man, we got what makes sense, and it makes sense for Houston's future for a bigger name player like a Daniil Hunter, who is the biggest name that Houston can probably dangle in front of teams' faces, then maybe it would make sense. Nothing should be made without it making sense, but also there should be no move that Houston makes from an ownership perspective that makes sense for the future with what your ideal for the franchise is. Because if I'm saying I don't think Nick Caserio will or should be here, then who should be in control of personnel decisions during this season? Who should sign off on these things? The ownership needs to have some say. I'm not saying go full Jerry Jones, but there needs to be some say into what does the future of this franchise look like, and does it make sense to keep some of these players here on the roster? This was a critical year for Houston. Next year will be a critical year for Houston. And my scare and wonder is these critical years where you want your quarterback to blossom, and in order for him to blossom, you typically need that consistency. If that continues to be an issue, then does it get to a point where the quarterback in a quarterback's league, does he say, I just can't do this anymore? I gave you guys everything, and you guys have, in return, given me nothing. Now, granted, 2024 is hard to judge because they traded for Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell was out there, and Nico. And when all three of those guys were out there, plus Joe Mixon, it was a different offense. It was a very different offense. But what's alarming to me, guys, is Houston signed Darrell Taylor this offseason, who I thought, and my everydayers know this, I raved about him. I thought that was a good signing. I thought that was a player that would have given Houston, the two top guys a relief when needed. Was wrong about that. But Darrell Taylor is currently making $5.5 this year. It was a healthy scratch. He only has one tackle on the year. Houston has to figure this thing out. And if it means moving on from some players right now, earlier than maybe the expectation was, or just kind of blowing this thing up in some way, then if that helps salvage your future, then I think it may need to be done. This game Sunday is going to tell a lot. It's going to tell a lot. And again, I'm adamant on they should not fire Nick Caley right now. He may actually get through to CJ. And this thing may turn around for CJ Stroud from a quarterback perspective. The thing is, the Texans made that decision when they shouldn't have. They got to ride with it. They got to ride it through. But you look at the damage, the potential damage of moving on from Nick Caley right now. Now, a lot of you guys are probably saying, why not? Other teams are doing it. Promote this guy, Gerard Johnson, get more play calling. And this is my pushback. It needs to be a collective unit working with the quarterback, man. It needs to be. Gerard Johnson knows his quarterback better than anybody. Nick Caley may know some things about the quarterback play, being around two great quarterbacks, one of the greatest of all time, and then also Matthew Stafford. Like, he may know some things that may work. Bill Lazor being, the senior offensive assistant, he may just understand the NFL a lot more and the purpose of perfecting play calling sequences. So this thing needs to be a collective fight together. That's why I don't feel like the Houston Texans should move on from Nick Caley right now. And they damn sure shouldn't do it before the bye week. I've been saying from day one, the bye week is going to be everything the Houston Texans need. Either it'll be where they need to make a decision to get over the hump for real, maybe making a trade, or they've realized they made a huge mistake. And at that point, they'll start moving off some of these guys. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast as well. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Until next time, ladies and gents, Texan fans across the nation, it's going to be all right. It's going to get greater later. The problem is that great ain't nowhere in sight. Peace.